All right, for this segment, we're going to be focusing on Donald Trump that has said that he looked at the visit of Xi Jinping to 3 Southeast Asian countries a way to screw the US. While Malaysia keep pushing open economy agenda between two big brothers, it also puts Malaysia in a tight spot to negotiate with the stubborn US. And for this episode, and this time we're going to welcome you, our guest, Dr. Tricia Yeoh, Associate Professor of Practice at the School of Politics and International Relations, University of Nottingham, Malaysia. I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Tricia, for joining me. Definitely, this is a very hot topic from last week, actually, with the announcement of the reciprocal tariff. Firstly, how do you assess the strategic timing of Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia, Cambodia and Vietnam in the context of the recent US reciprocal tariffs on the Southeast Asian countries?
Thank you so much, Nina, for having me. First of all, I do think the visit by President Xi Jinping to Malaysia was actually planned before Trump's announcement of the reciprocal tariffs. However, we know that this US-China trade war has been going on for a long time. It's not just from the 2nd of April. Of course, that accelerated it. So the strategic timing of President Xi's visit, of course, is timed very well because Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN, and China, given the position it's in, would like to re-establish or enhance ties with all Southeast Asian countries across ASEAN, and particularly Malaysia. He has also been to visit Cambodia and Vietnam, of course, that were hit by really high tariffs, 49 and 46% respectively. Malaysia got 24%. So what you see from the visit yesterday and today will probably be a slew of different announcements, but above the announcement essentially is to foster closer, stronger bilateral ties. And President Xi has already talked about another golden 50-year relationship between Malaysia and China.
And to what extent do you believe that we can see from the situation Xi's Sham offensive will succeed in strengthening China's economic and political influence in Southeast Asia, especially given Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship this year?
It will strengthen ties, but I think we need to also be a little bit circumspect about what the reality of these strengthening of economic ties look like. I think there is a number of memorandum of understandings, MOUs, that are being signed. The MOUs themselves are more educational, cultural. There's some MOUs around digital transformation, for example. What this results in actual concrete economic terms remains to be seen. Of course, there's existing or pre-existing BRI or Belt and Road Initiative related projects like the ECRL that are still in the works and will still need to be fully constructed to see what the impact and economic effects will be. And at the same time, of course, not forgetting that while we develop these deeper ties with China, and that's already been happening over the last year, Malaysia still has a very important trading partner in the form of the US, right? So I think this is the whole point of the predicament that Malaysia is actually put in, because it has already sent diplomats and negotiators over to Washington, D.C. to try and get a deal with Donald Trump. And that's actually what Donald Trump wants, right? To have the nations of the world coming before him and bowing at his feet, so to speak, to figure out a deal. But the point is, are we going to be able to be strategic and intelligent enough to navigate the waters between these two major superpowers of the world in a way that will benefit us and also benefit the region as a whole? So that's going to be difficult to navigate.
It's definitely not an easy task for us, especially considering we're an open and small economy. And talking about the Southeast Asia, how can they balance their historical preference for the US against the growing economic pressures and incentive to align more closely with China amid tariff tensions?
Well, I think the mere fact that Malaysia and Southeast Asia lie within the vicinity of China itself in terms of geography, that itself tells you that where the affiliation would be naturally, historically. We also share a lot of these more cultural nuances that perhaps we have up to now not fully been able to align with the so-called Western appeal. Having said that, I think Asian values can also sometimes be a guise for countries to eschew democratic norms and values, which are also very important, right, to uphold, especially in countries like Malaysia, where we don't have like a military dictator. We still want to uphold those values. So those ties will be there. I think if you talk about the economic value of these relationships, without a doubt, we will be making decisions that are best suited for our interests. For example, being able to strengthen the supply chains within the region, strengthen supply chains between ASEAN and China, and also not forgetting other countries, right, like India, which also stands to gain as a result of this US-China trade war. The last thing I'll mention right now is just that there's also a security aspect to this. We haven't said very much about what's happening in the South China Sea, and I don't think that will be discussed at this particular visit, since trade and economy are weighing high on the priority list. I'm not sure how Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim will also feel, whether he's comfortable about broaching the subject of territorial sea disputes in the South China Sea, different, right, from the position that is being taken by the Philippines. However, I do think that moving forward, if China really does want to increase and enhance its relationship with Malaysia and with the region, there are certain things that we also want to put forward on the table. One of them is a security issue. The other one, of course, is how do we expect or ask for possibly greater governance standards. One big, hot potato issue would be state-owned enterprises and how China is going to look at their SOEs in the same way that, Malaysia should also be pressured into looking into our own SOEs, or what we prefer to call GLCs, the government-linked companies in our own country.
And also the war between the big brothers, many have expected to continue until the end of year 2025. So I'm going to take a look at the potential long-term consequences, especially for ASEAN economies, integration and regional supply chains. If countries start imposing trade barriers on Chinese goods as a defensive measure.
Yeah, that's going to be the trick. So I think in an article that I wrote recently, I said that ASEAN countries need to really resist imposing any form of retaliatory trade barriers, firstly on each other, because suddenly you're going to see an overabundance and oversupply of cheap goods coming from China into our markets, and also perhaps possibly from other countries within the region, right? So like Vietnam as well will be looking for new markets, and of course Malaysia will be looking for new markets. And these three countries also are producing fairly similar items when it comes to electronic goods, E&E, right, semiconductors and so on. So it's really important that we actually try to do some more collective negotiation and collective discussion in concrete terms, not just on, speaking in sort of very motherhood grand narrative statements. And the importance of these collective agreements would be that we commit to not necessarily harming each other's economies, right? So I know it's very difficult for countries because at the end of the day, countries are thinking about their own sovereignty, they're thinking about their own strategic interests, but this will really be a test of the ASEAN centrality and the so-called, economic inclusion and integration within the region. Are we able to strengthen the entire region as a whole, as opposed to just thinking about our own strategic interests in a very, Machiavellian manner? And of course, this includes China as well, right? So ASEAN plus other nations in the neighborhood, what would be in the best strategic and economic interest of us as a collective whole. But I mean, I say that, but I don't, I'm not in a position of being a negotiator, so I don't envy those who are trying to think about these economic and trade solutions. I am sure that they are very difficult. It really is a policy dilemma for anyone who's in a policy-making position at the moment. So we wish our policymakers all the best, and I'm also happy to contribute ideas if ever there's an opportunity.
All right, thank you very much for this very insightful discussion as said by our Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim at the official dinner in honor of His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China. As he said on his last word, may the friendship between Malaysia and China endure deep as the sea, steady as the stars, and bright with the promise of tomorrow. Again, I'll say thank you very much to our guest, Dr. Tricia Yeoh, and definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in AstroAWANI.com across all social media platforms. And please stay with us as we will bring more updates on the World Economic Forum on the top stories of the week after this.